Hi everybody, I hope you're well and welcome back to the 10 orchestration technique series. It's been a while. In the previous episodes we arranged and orchestrated the same melody in lots and lots of different styles, trying a huge variety of orchestrations and combinations of different instruments to portray all sorts of moods and emotions. Some sounded pretty and uplifting. Some were dark and mysterious. Some were complete rip-offs. And some, sadly, did not work very well. But what's more important is to try and keep a curious mind at all time and keep exploring the wonderful well that is composition and orchestration in all its mysteries and endless possibilities for new sounds. Oh man, no. So in today's episodes we'll take a closer look at more examples, maybe slightly less orchestral if possible, and more focused on smaller groups of instruments and medium to soft dynamics. Don't worry though, I still made sure to include a couple of big ones that you always seem to enjoy very much. So without much further ado, let's start with number 61. It has now become a tradition to start with a couple of simple examples. This particular sound you just heard is been done so much, and that's why I tried to stay away from it for as long as possible. Harmonically, there isn't much happening. It's basically just an ostinato bumping up and down the harmonic minor scale and outlining two chords, D minor and A major over C sharp. The ostinato is taken by cellos, soon after joined by violas to fill out the harmony a little bit more. And just to make it a touch more interesting, I've added bassoons and bass clarinet playing this figure that complements the ostinato. So here's a little trick of mine I use all the time. Very subtle, but we also have harp playing the very same thing as cellos, but an octave above. The reason is, without any sort of harmonic accompaniment, those short notes were starting to sound a touch too playful for my taste. And I wanted some extra support to make them feel a tad longer. You can easily achieve that effect by layering your ostinato with something that sustains. I could have just as easily used trombones or French horns playing some chords. Bass and melody are played by double basses, pits and violins. That was all pretty standard, but I still wanted to put my own twist into it. So I've added this piano part, which is doubling the violins in the lower octave, and the higher octave is offset by an eighth, which is making it feel like it's dragging ahead of the beat. All that's left now is percussion. For that I've used timpani and bass drum to fill out the low end, and the cymbals were all going together with a harp gliss and a woodwind run to introduce the entrance of the melody. Let's play everything together. Even if the vibe is very different, I feel like this one is similar in a lot of ways to the previous example. The bare essentials are pretty much the same. We have some form of string ostinato going together with a lyrical line now taken by the clarinets. Differently from before though, I'm now fine with a more playful quality of short notes. So there wasn't really any need of extra support by sustains. All I've really done here is using harp, gently rolling the chord changes just to make them a touch clearer. As I was about to say before, the melody is now taken by clarinets and French horns doing some call and answer. We also have Celeste doubling the end of the clarinet's phrases, just to blur a little bit of the squeakiness they can have the higher they get in register. The rest of the instruments are really just trying to set a positive, playful vibe, and for that I've used triangle and low string pits. Let's put everything together. As promised, we'll now move on to more interesting things. I do admit I've done similar things in the past episodes, so if you want to listen to some kind of variation of this, you can go back and listen to number 1, 17 and 56. They may be similar to this one, but I still wanted to show you how you can expand on something you have done previously by mixing things up creatively. You know, the goal of the series was never to take me too literally, even if you can if you want to, but it was hopefully to inspire you to try new things and different combinations, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Alright, let's start with the harmony. So what you just heard is basically my usual kind of progressions that you must have heard like a billion times by now. The melody is now very high in register, played by violins into octaves, but also French horns, drifting in and out and following the same shape of the line. Just like example 1, cellos and violas are providing a lot of the movement by playing these fast arpeggios, moving in contrary motion. Even in a short example like this one, I always try to leave spaces in the orchestration to give myself some room to grow in case I want to. Once you've used up all the instruments, it's going to be hard to go back and, you know, delete things, because obviously our ears get accustomed to a bigger kind of sound. If you put that in comparison with the smaller version, that's always going to be the winner because it sounds more exciting, but that doesn't necessarily make it better. So what I'm doing here is essentially just using bassoons and basses to play the chords and saving the trombones for the second crescendo, just so once we finally get to that part, it's gonna feel way more satisfying than if we had the trombones playing throughout the entire example. Woodwinds are not really doing much here, but we still have flutes and oboes playing in the gaps of the melody and finishing the last phrase together with piano. And in the percussion section, we only really have a couple of swells and harp rolling the chords as usual. this one, I wanted to see if I could write something using only percussion. Believe it or not, a lot of this was actually inspired by funk music. First of all, there is a lot of syncopation. Then we have accents happening in different places in the bar and spread out across multiple instruments. On the melody, we have this bell-like kind of sound, which I achieved by using harp, glocks, celeste, and tubular bells. And the accompaniment is taken only by marimba, but before we listen to that, let's have a closer look to that part first. Triangle, woodblock and tambourine are playing this kind of rhythm with accents happening all over the place, like we mentioned. And in the bottom end we have muted bass drum together with timpani, but played with hot rods to have a crispier kind of sound. Before we move on to the next one, I feel like I need to alert you. If you're using headphones, you might want to turn down just a slightly bit because it's gonna get pretty loud. I'm gonna give you 1 more second. You done? Okay, let's go. So I resisted the temptation to do Star Wars from the very first episode, but apparently I couldn't really help myself and I had to get it out of my system. Let's talk a bit about the harmony first. I'm using a lot of the same chords and voicings as Williams did. There are some exceptions, of course, but that's only because my melody has quite a different form and I always try to adapt the harmony to the melody and not on the other way around. We have the melody on trumpets. The rest of brass and percussion are accompanying the trumpets with some big stabs in the background. Low strings and woodwinds are also playing the very same rhythm. On top of all that, we have this shimmery kind of texture with violins playing tremolando and woodwind trills. What I wrote here for the woodwinds is not something I would necessarily do if I wasn't limited by the samples I'm using, which only really go up to major seconds intervals. I would voice them differently because I don't want to have too many major thirds happening at the same time. What I would do instead is basically just using 9s and 6ths and maybe voice lead the chords more efficiently. Finally, on the last bar, we end with a big 4 octaves unisons played by violins and woodwinds, harmonized by brass and low strings. This is a classic waltz-like jazzy kind of sound, and my very first instinct was to use muted trumpet for the melody. The harmonic kind of moves in predictable ways for this kind of style of music. For the accompaniment, I've used upright piano, but also bass, doubling the left hand and bouncing up and down roots and fifths, but also acoustic guitar, doubling the right hand and playing on 2 and 3. For some reason, I don't quite know why, I was drawn to toy piano, which is quite unusual. And just as unusual, I've used string pits, but playing on big 1 rather than the strong beats. It's quite a subtle color, and I think you'd only notice it if you knew it was there. And finally, we have muted trombones playing dyads every 2 bars and ending with a strange harmony part together with clarinets. This one is largely based on the diminished scale or octatonic scale, and we have piccolo taking the melody in an unusually low register that makes it sound slightly exotic. We have some really weird clustered chords in the accompaniment with a slightly quirky kind of vibe, and to add a touch of mysteriousness, I voice them in such a way that we have a lot of unusual cross voicings in the strings, making it very difficult to tell what is going on. We have at the top violin 1 divisi and violas playing higher than violin 2 and cellos higher than violas on beat 1 and 3. Using different intra-family articulations like I do here with violin 1 spiccato rather than pits like the rest of the string section also helps to sell the mood I'm going for. If you want to try similar things, I really advise you to be careful with the notes you decide to double, because things like this tend to be quite unstable and all of a sudden you might find a note or two sticking out in an unpleasant way that you might not want to. For this very reason, I decided to add a touch more clarity to the most important chord tones by using French horns as well. Holding the bottom, we have marimba, which I simply love to use in its warm low register, but also bass and woodblock 2 accent beat 3. And as usual, I've added a little embellishment in the gap of the melody played by harp, celeste and vibes. This example has a lot in common with the previous, I think, and even if it sounds nothing like it, obviously, it does achieve many of the same things by using uncommitted harmony to create mystery. The devices may be the same, but what's different now is the context, as we're now approaching a more foggy, suspenseful kind of environment. And the orchestration here is entirely in the service of the mood I'm trying to sell. Violins are playing harmonics, which by nature makes them sound very cold by lacking a lot of the natural overtones. I then use tam-tam, which has the function of basically washing out the entire sound field with a lot of white noise. And just like I did before, I've attached more clarity to my chords by using woodwinds now, so it's pretty much the same kind of trick. The melody here is on low strings and low woodwinds playing 2 octaves apart. And the last thing to look at is the celeste and piano flourish. And if it sounds familiar, it's only because it is familiar, as I placed it pretty much exactly in the same spot as it was in the previous example. Let's play everything together. I feel like you probably recognize this one too, right? It's really quite a simple one, but I think there are a couple of little tricks in there which I simply love, and I think they're worth talking about. First of all is this French horn-like sound that you can get by layering alto flute, English horn, clarinets and bassoons, all playing together in the very same register. The second thing I want to talk about is how to use runs to both outline the harmony and create accents. You know, John Williams used to be a jazz guy, and I think he must have noticed how in a fast bebop solo, changing the direction of the line would create this little popping sound that sounds like an accent, and it is particularly evident when horns players do it. And that's what I'm trying to do here, just, you know, picking the right notes that outline the harmony, changing the direction of the line frequently, and using violins and celeste, playing with the pedal engaged to create this beautiful blur, as Williams described it. The rest is really quite simple. We only really have cellos playing pits and violas playing very softly. Great, let's do the last one. As usual, I wanted to try something different for the last example, and for this one I was going for a gypsy kind of vibe, but without being too literal in the harmony and the orchestration. The melody is on solo violin and acoustic guitar playing on the lower octave. I then use cimbalom. I then use cimbalom. I then use cimbalom to arpeggiate the chords. We have double basses and cellos playing pits, and acoustic guitar playing on all the down beats. And finally, I've glued everything down with accordion playing some sustains. Alright guys, that's it. So if you enjoy content like this that takes an enormous amount of time to create, please do consider becoming a patron. What you get in return is a lot of extra stuff like the project files for this session and all the previous episodes, and videos of myself talking and orchestrating live and composing live and all these kind of things. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, smash it, comment and subscribe and all that. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.